Good morning. It's John Harmon. I'm founder, president, and CEO of the African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey. And I know there's more of you that are going to be joining us here shortly, but we wanted to get started on time because today's presentation is so important. And I will introduce our presenter in a few minutes here, but I just wanted to just start a little talk about the African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey. There's a couple slides here, and I'll turn it over to Don Brown, who's the managing director and wealth advisor for PPAC Gladstone Bank, one of the members and big time supporters here at the African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey. So our chamber was really established in 2007 to really position businesses, particularly Black businesses, for economic opportunity in this capitalistic society that we coexist in, not only here in New Jersey, but leveraging our partnerships with the National Black Chamber and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce so that we can provide you with a full perspective of all the happenings as it relates to business. Next slide. Coming up this weekend, this Saturday, our television show, award-winning television show, Pathway to Success, September 3rd from 9 to 9:30, NJTV or online, njtvonline.org. Our guest will be Chris A. Cope, practice leader, H2M Architects and Engineers. We would be pleased to see you this Saturday. If you can't make it this Saturday, you can always tune in on Tuesday at 11:30 p.m. Same channel, same online presence. Next. Our Business Leadership Conference is coming up very soon, September 20th and the 21st. Two-day event. The first evening kicks off with some networking and relationship building. And then we'll transition on the next day into a full day of panel discussions about business, economic opportunity, policy. This is going to take place at the Palace in Somerset Park, New Jersey. The theme this year is strengthening New Jersey's economy together. At the end of the day, success is not achieved in a vacuum. You must be strategically aligned with those that have influence, have resources, opportunities, and information. And so at our 15th anniversary Business Leadership Conference, you'll get all that and more. So we would encourage you to register today at aaccnj.com. Don't wait until the last minute, ladies and gentlemen. We need you to sign up today and be a part of this great networking event. We're going to have some phenomenal people on the panel that I'm sure if you are there, you listen, you ask questions, they could add value to your business model and ultimately the success and sustainability of your business enterprise. Enough from me. I had Ms. Dawn Brown standing by. Today's topic is so important. Marriage, relationships in general is more than just an emotional engagement. You can get into these situations very emotionally, but not really having an understanding of what the plan is. From an economic standpoint, could lead to some turbulence and ultimately, separation. So we want to get in front of that. As you're dating, as you're seeking to be engaged, we have Dawn Brown here, Managing Director and Wealth Advisor for PPAC Gladstone Bank, to kind of get you prepared before you sign on the dotted line or go out and purchase those big rings and make these future plans, and then come to find out that things are not quite what you thought they were. So, Ms. Brown, I'm going to yield back. It's your show now. I am really looking forward to your presentation today. And special thanks to PPAC Gladstone Bank for affording us this opportunity. And for those out there in Facebook land, enjoy. Ms. Brown?
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank the Chamber for inviting me here this afternoon to speak with everyone about this very important topic. So I'd like to start off by sharing my screen. I hope everyone can see the screen quite clearly.
Yes.
Great. So this is just a little bit about PPAC Gladstone Bank. As of June 30th, we're an organization that manages about 9.5 billion of assets under management. And we, focus on providing families and businesses and individuals with holistic investment management advice. And today, as Mr. Harmon has said, that we're talking about marriage. And what we're talking about is the things that you kind of really need to do before that wedding day. And we want you to really think about the financial aspect and think of it as being romantic too. Because when you get together initially, what is bringing you together is that attraction and that romance. And we want you to think of the money in that way and to put it in part of that equation to help you on the road to have a successful married life and not just be looking to plan a wedding. Oh, that can be fun and stressful, but we're looking for the long-term and the long-term married life. You know each other's favorite movies and and vacation destinations, but do you know your partner's credit score? And this may not be an initial, something you need to discuss initially, but when you start to think and plan about that long life together for a married life together, knowing your partner's score is something that is important. When you start to plan that wedding, do you have a budget and are you actually sticking to it? It's really good to say you have a budget, but you need to look at it, look at each different line item in it. And if there is something, the flowers that you're deciding to buy, if you're going over budget there, you need to look, is there another area that you can, reduce it by to keep you within that overall budget? And I'm hoping that when you have planned that budget, it is something that is certainly affordable for you. And if you are getting help outside as well, that it's all affordable, because it's a memorable day, that wedding day, but we're looking for you to have a successful married life. And we don't want you to spend so much money on the wedding day. You're putting yourself in a financial bind for what needs to come after that day as well. And how easy was it for you to come up with that wedding budget? Did you have to ask parents or other people to help you with the financing of that budget? Because if you're having problems coming up with that wedding budget, that may be something you need to think about of how are you going to budget for your daily life. If there are problems there, that may be an indication that there are problems later on. So here is your opportunity to really start thinking about what is the best way forward and how are you going to handle these situations. So you need to get ready for that talk. Because you are about building a relationship. It's not a fairy tale. And there's a lot of people posting their stuff on social media now, and oftentimes they post the best things, the things that they're happiest with. And we grow up sometimes reading these fairy tales and they have all of these happy endings. But relationships take time and it takes a lot of effort. And by being open about finances, that really is going to give you a good stepping stone on towards the ladder of a long and fruitful marriage. And it's never too soon to begin, because once you pass that initial dating stage and you think that this is something more long term, it should be something that you start to think, how are we going to build that life together? What do we want that life together to look like? It's really never too soon to begin. And it's not just about having one conversation. It's not, let's sit down and have the talk. It's about doing things over time because it's usually easier to handle. And, by breaking it down into smaller segments and focusing on different things at a time, it'll make it be easier to comprehend and consider the other person's point of view to make sure you come up with a comprehensive decision that is best for you both moving forwards. And how would it feel about how would it feel if talking about money with your partner was safe and secure? You want it to be a small conversation and to feel that you can be open and discuss whatever your financial obligations are in a safe and secure environment so that you feel comfortable speaking to each other. Because if you don't, you're not going to be open. People will not be open if they feel they're going to be judged about probably some of the liabilities they have, and are not going to talk about it. And that's just creating a situation that if the person finds out much later on after, exchanging vows, it may be putting you in a situation that can create some animosity. And that's certainly not going to be fruitful for the relationship moving forward. And it can be vulnerable. You can be putting yourself in a vulnerable position, and it can be scary because you're being open. And we grow up in a society where it's not always acceptable to talk about money. People don't necessarily talk about their salaries. Or when they're buying, people may say, "Oh, I bought a new car," but we don't know whether they bought it by cash or if they're taking out a loan or what type of interest rate they got. Those are not the specifics that we speak about. So now when you're being really open with somebody, it can be scary, but it is a conversation that really should take place before the wedding vows have been said, because it's going to put you in a better position overall for having a better, long life, wonderful and successful married life. So step one, show. It's going to be a show and tell. Put it on paper or a spreadsheet. There are many websites now that you can track and create a budget on, or keep track your finances. So if whatever methodology you use, it's fine to have that information available and then set a time where you're going to share it with each other. And so what we're talking about here now is, each of your individual budgets. What do you spend on housing? What do you spend on transportation and any other debts and things like that? Have it down on paper, so then it's going to be easier to talk about it. So what's your balance sheet? What are your assets that you have? Does one or either of you still already have a home or your cars? What's the situation there? What is your income? People don't often want to speak about their salary, but if you're joining life together and you're going to be spending on things together, then it is really important that you talk about your income and your spending. That infamous tax return that gets filed on April 15th or thereabouts, or sometimes people file an extension. It's truly important that you understand each other's tax return beforehand, so you know that when you're going to join together and become a couple, you're more than likely going to file a joint tax return. On that tax return, you each will be signing it, so you are each equally responsible for what is on that piece of paper. So you want to understand your own tax return and then know that how you're going to file going forward. For most people, it's most advantageous to file a joint return because the deductions and credits that you get are usually more advantageous for a joint couple than for what's called if you're married filing separately. That's usually disadvantageous, but that's when you won't be responsible for what's on the return jointly. And as I mentioned before, credit scores. It's really important. The majority of the Americans, I think there's about 2/3 of Americans, have a credit score between I think 550 and 650. The higher the score is, closer to the 800 range, will mean that you're in a better position to get when you're taking out a mortgage or any type of loan. So it's really important that you understand what those credit scores are, because that will impact the financial decisions you're making in the future. If you're deciding to buy a home together and you're going to be taking out a mortgage and it's jointly, you need to understand what type of interest rate the mortgage company is going to be providing you with. And, you know, it's really to be able to have these decisions and to have these discussions, you need to understand how each person grew up with money. Was it a family that was open, or was it a family that, you know, this is something that we don't talk about? You know, were there any family conversations about money? You know, in my particular family, my mother, she was widowed at very early. I was probably 12 years old when my father passed away. And, you know, I know it was hard on my mom. You know, she's a widow. She was certainly working, but, you know, I come from a family where my mother has 7 children. So it was a lot of people to support. So we know it was difficult just by the fact that we had a large family. It wasn't that we really had the family conversations about it. You just had some knowledge. But some families may be more open and discuss things, and that will impact how the couple who are looking to get married will determine how they're going to have those conversations themselves. Because if they didn't have it in their own families growing up, it may be harder for them to have those conversations going forward. You know, what was your awareness of money? You know, were you in a family where where the family had investments? And was that something that was talked about? Or we're investing for your college education, we're investing because we're for our retirement? Or was it where a family that were in the situation where they lived paycheck to paycheck, so it wasn't one where they had extra money to spend? There wasn't a lot of holiday gifts that were given out. What was your awareness of money in your in your own family situation? And it would be good for you each to understand each other's situation, so that when you're having the discussion, you can try to understand the other person's perspective. And as you move forward, what are you going to be your financial priorities? Uh, if you do not own a home, is that going to be one of the top things you work towards buying? Or is it that you live in an area where property, real estate is very expensive, like California and New York, and it would really be a stretch to do something like that? So you have other financial priorities that you are dealing with. And are there any family cultural differences and expectations? You know, depending on what culture you grow up with, there may be certain expectations that the family have. It may be that you're expected to have a certain type of wedding. I have just come back from the UK. That's where my family is. And I was speaking to a cousin of mine whose daughter got married quite recently. And her spouse is originally from South Africa. And his family wanted them to have a really big wedding, but my cousin's daughter decided that's not what she wanted. She wanted something very small, not a very big family celebration. It was just in a local registry office, and it was a very, very small thing. But the compromise there was that they will go to South Africa in December, and they will have a bigger family celebration over there. So there are expectations, and you have to decide, okay, how are you going to come up with a compromise? And instead of having a big family celebration in England, and also going on to do a big family celebration in South Africa, they came up with that compromise. So what is the expectation of the families? Because for parents, they often look forward to the celebration of seeing their children getting married, and want to have many other family members participate and witness this event too. But it's up to the bride and groom about how they're going to decide to celebrate that day. And how does that affect family relationships? And do you come, you know, what type of compromise are you going to be coming up with? Because with the couple joining together, you're joining those families together as well. So it would be good if you can discuss the differences and what expectations there are so that you move forward in a positive way. I know in some cultures, especially when their parents become older, it's known and accepted that that family member may come and live with one of the children. And if you're the child, it's going to be the one that more than likely that parent may come to, or parents may come to when they're older. Is that something that you've discussed with your spouse to be, that this is potentially going to be something that's expected of me and that I want to do, and I want you to be aware of it up front. And step through money going forward. So once you decide on a wedding, you're usually going to have plenty of planning time. So if you can start that conversation at least 6 months before the wedding, preferably before you get engaged, it would be great. And as I said before, it's not one conversation, it's several small conversations. And you can break it down into one about the credit scores, another conversation about your income and your spending, another one about your assets. It's not one conversation. And, during the time that you're dating, you certainly are going to have tips about those types of things, about, how does the person spend their money? What types of places are you going to? What types of restaurants are you going out to eat at? Is it ones that you're used to going to, or is it more higher end that when you're used to? And is that because one person says, oh, this is where I normally go? So you see, okay, they're used to spending at higher end places as well. But what you need to understand as well, when the bill is being paid at the end of the day, it likely it's going on a credit card, but how is that person handling that credit card bill? Are they paying it off on a monthly basis, or are they carrying a balance on it and incurring interest charges as they go along? And how are things going to be divided up? Yours, mine, or ours? And that's a decision that you really have to make, and it's best to make it upfront. Are you more likely have a savings account and a checking account? Are you going to combine all of that to make it into put all of those funds into one joint account? Are you going to just open up a joint account and put money into that joint account from each of your accounts to pay all of your bills? You have to decide what is the best way to move forward for yourselves. Some people don't feel comfortable, especially if it's you've been independent for a while, you've had your own apartments, you've been paying your bills yourself, and you don't necessarily think, oh, I don't want all of my money combined with the other person's. Or you may not want that initially. But as you move on and you feel more comfortable, then you combine your savings and your checking accounts. And what you really have to think about here is, what are the goals for that money? And as you move forward with those goals, how are you saving for them? How are you going to save for them jointly and still perhaps feel like I have some independence to spend money at my free will? And the other thing that needs to be thought about here is are both couples working? If one couple isn't working, one person in one partner is not working, they need to be able to feel that they have something that they can own of their own, or that they can spend money freely within the budget without them feeling that they need to ask and get permission all the time. So that's why that upfront step of setting a budget, so everyone understands how much money is going to be spent on each of these things, particularly the discretionary items, is really important. If you are thinking to plan a family, what are the expectations? Is one person going to step back from the workforce? Because, those are really important decisions to discuss before up front. And as a mother, I know it's really important to understand what role each person is going to have. I've always decided that, even though when I had my daughter, I wanted to remain in the workforce. That's definitely something I wanted to do. Returning to work after 3 months was extremely hard, but I knew I wanted to continue with my career. and I only have one child. But for people who decide that they're going to have larger families, it may be harder for one person to go back into the workforce, the mother to go back into the workforce, because childcare is extremely expensive. And you need to balance by looking to see how much you're earning, to see whether, what's the cost and the cost of the childcare in comparison to what the person's been earning. And having that discussion, because it's not just about the person or how much the person is earning, it's what their career aspirations are. Sometimes people don't want to be out of the workforce for 5-6 years until the children start going to school, because of the position that puts them in for that with their career. They're not able to climb the steps as easily and as quickly as they would like if they take a step back from the workforce. So it's important to decide and have that discussion about whether one person will likely be stepping back, who that person will, and what the next step is in terms of returning to work. And as we know, everything is not going to be set in stone. This is a discussion you're having up front, but when you actually start the family and that, things may certainly change, but at least you've had a discussion, so you will have information on the other person's point of view. And as I said, you're doing this initial discussion now, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So we need to be realistic and plan for change. Because things will change along the way. You may plan to have one child, you may end up having twins. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. So it's very important to, to take the different steps, to show each other, to tell each other, and look at how are you going forward. These are some of the steps that you need to take to help you towards setting yourself up for a successful married life. Some people are in a very strong financial position and they feel that they should have a prenuptial agreement. Sometimes you may find that it's hard to have that discussion, and people think, well, why are you planning for us to break up? We're starting a marriage, and why are you planning on the ending of the marriage? But this is just a step to put in place so it is clear what will happen in that particular situation. So sometimes more couples are bringing more assets to the table, and more assets to the table than what their parents did. So with that in mind, it may be that you want to be clear on how that will be divided, or as we talked about before, what's yours and what's mine's, and what is going to be joint. Make these decisions up front so it is clear, and that one person doesn't feel like I'm losing something that I built before I even became married. Because marriage is ultimately an economic and it's a legal arrangement. It's a contract. When you decide to get married, you're creating a contractual relationship with each other to stay together. And, different people say different vows, but some of them is for better or worse. And worse could be a time when you have some financial difficulties and you're committing to be together. But as we know, there are many marriages that end with divorce. So by having a prenuptial agreement where it is appropriate, it just makes things clear ahead of time how assets will be distributed. Prenups do not cause a divorce. They can cause disruption in wedding planning, for sure, but they don't cause a divorce. And just like how, you have homeowners insurance. It's something that you're putting into place in case something happens. It's just a prudent action that you're taking. So a prenup is not going to cause a divorce. It may cause some difficult conversations, but it will just make things clearer if, unfortunately, the situation is that the marriage ends up with in a divorce. And oftentimes when it's a remarriage, that's another time when a prenuptial agreement is often put in place. And if you think about it, if a couple is married, they have children, they get divorced, and then there's a second marriage, to protect the children from the first marriage, sometimes a prenuptial agreement is put into place. So it is clear what if there's a second divorce, what the children will be receiving, or what the new spouse would receive as well. And these are it's an agreement, but at the end of the day, I believe it's only between 6 and 8% of marriages start with a prenuptial agreement. But in situations where it is appropriate, it should be discussed beforehand, and it should be discussed clearly and upfront, because if everything that is owned financially is not declared in the prenuptial agreement, then it can become null and void. So these are some of the time areas where it makes sense, where one spouse is supporting the other during they're studying for the graduate school. One spouse agrees to step back from a career to raise children. So even though that person is not earning, they're going to know that if the marriage ends in divorce, that the assets are going to be split in a more fair way. And if one person in the marriage is entering with a lot of debt, you have the prenup in place to say that that is that person's responsibility afterwards, or it may be the person that may decide that they were willing to pay some money towards that debt that was brought into the marriage, even during the breakup. One spouse owns a business, because that, of course, creates a whole different liability situation. There's a significant wealth disparity. So it may be the person who is wealthier wants to make sure or feel that the person that they're marrying is not marrying them for their money. And at least one of the spouses has children, as I said, especially if this is a second marriage, they have children. They want to know that those children will be protected if a divorce takes place, and that all the money may not go to the spouse that they're divorcing, when they want to make sure assets are available for their children. And, there are also alternatives to a prenup as well. So you can also set up a trust. And sometimes, in my experience, we'll find that parents often set up trusts for their children, especially for wealthier parents, because they are thinking to themselves, in case something happens, in case there is a divorce, the money that they've helped to build for their children, they want to keep it in trust and have the children have it in trust, so that in a divorce situation, those assets are not accessible for the spouse that is being that they're getting divorced from. So the individual could set up a trust, or sometimes their parents have set up money in trust for them. And then you have separate accounts that are not used to support the marriage. And in states, now New Jersey isn't one, but there are certain states where things are more looked like together. And so in those situations, the money has to be kept separate for it to not be looked at as marital money. So you may have a situation where one person, say the wife, has inherited money from a parent. If that money is then put into a joint marital account, it will be looked at as joint marital assets. If you keep that money separate, if the wife kept that money separate in her own individual name, then if in a situation of a divorce, then it can be looked at, well, I never use this for any joint marital things. I've always kept this money separate. And so there may be easier to make an argument that that money is really not a joint marital asset. So those are really the areas that I wanted to discuss with you today. So thinking about showing each other what you need, what each person's situation is, telling each other what your expectations are there any family differences, and then having that full discussion and with openness in a safe and secure environment to help the person, to help both people feel secure in the conversation and to put you on the right step and track for a long-lasting married life. I'd like to open it up for any questions now, and please feel free to put them in the Q&A because that's accessible to me so that I can hear, any things that you probably want to have clarity on, or any other thoughts that you have.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Harmon, yes.
Yeah, let me start. I have a couple of questions. My first question is, when did you guys start this program, and why? What led you to start it?
So we did this presentation about a month ago, but discussing marriage with people is part of what we do every day. I've been with the firm that I was working for, merged with people at Guide Work about 5 years ago, but prior to that I worked for a company in Manhattan for 15 years. So I have over 20 years of experience working with individuals and couples, and it's really been over time you've had different situations, parents coming to us concerned about their child that getting married, or a young couple coming to us and discussing things. And you may have it's really interesting when you see couple where one is a saver and one is a spender, and they come to us to do a plan for them, and we get them to complete a questionnaire, and they're not on the same, they're not on the same road. One may want to be going off to the right and one may be going off to the left, and you have to work with them to help them to come up with some type of compromise as to what are the look at those goals, how are you going to prioritize those goals, and to help them come up with a good compromise.
So, you said some, one thing we have in common. I come from a family of 7 children as well, so I can kind of relate to that. But in a lot of households, talking about money is not something they do, or they have not grown up with the tradition of understanding these issues that are probably talked around the dinner table on a lot of occasions. And I hear some of my colleagues talking about, oh, my daughter is getting married and we gave them X amount of dollars for their wedding, we gave them money for their house. And so those conversations clearly didn't happen in my household. We have to learn. But I want to get to one of the things you mentioned about the prenuptial. It's about clarity.
Yes.
So I want you to talk about that a little bit. Similarly, about a will. When you die, you want to leave your own way of your affairs being handled. Similarly, for a prenup, if things go left, you want to have some information that you had in advance how you want to dissolve or go forward. So can you speak to that, the significance of clarity?
Yeah, so that's what we're saying about having this conversation. You're having this conversation to make things clear, to clearly communicate what the expectations are up front. And so one of the things to do up front is to determine whether a prenup is appropriate for you. And only the couple can really decide that, but they each have to have their own representation. They each have to have their own lawyer in that situation. So to make sure that they are fully represented in that situation. And, as much as we talk about it, the stats are only between 6 and 8% of marriages actually have a prenup. I mean, and we can think to ourselves, is that because more people don't need it? Or is it just that people are scared to have that conversation? I remember one particular client that we had, she'd been a client for us over 10 years. She was a widow and she met someone else. And, the joy in her face, and when after she met someone else, after the tragedy when her spouse passed away. And they were together, they both have children, and when they decided that they were getting married, she came in and had a meeting with us, and she said, he wants me to sign a prenup. Like, a prenup. He's like, it's a completely different man. It's not the person who she thought she was going to marry. She was really upset about it. And we spoke to her and said, this is not about the way he feels about you. It's not about the love he has for you. This is only about being prepared. And he has 2 children that he wants to make sure are going to be okay if something happens. So he's just making it clear to you upfront what the financial situation is. This is how things will be divided, because I want to make sure my children are well off. And as you mentioned as well, he was making sure that she also knew upfront that if he was to pass away before her, then this is how things would be distributed. He was making sure that his children would be taken care of as well. And it took a few conversations with her for her to, become to feel more comfortable with that. And because we were her financial advisor, we helped her put her financial information together, and it turns out she actually had less finances than he thought. So it was good to have that conversation and make things clear ahead of time, and to make and she be it took some time, but she did become more comfortable with it. And they are certainly happily married, but there's hiccups along the road, and that was a hiccup along the way for them planning their wedding. But it was something that he determined that he wanted. She felt it was pushed on her, but it wasn't a last minute thing. And that's the other thing. You never want it to be a last minute thing. This is not something you bring up a week before the wedding day. That's certainly not what you do. And as you said, start to plan things like 6 months ahead of time and start to have these discussions so that it's clear what the expectation is. And as you said, you had mentioned about a will as well. So estate planning is very, very important. One of the things to do with this planning is to create a will. Some people may feel that they need to have trust for their assets. And when you create a will, it should be clear as to who's going to get what, particularly if there's a second marriage. What is going to go to the current spouse when the person passes away, and if there is children from a first marriage, what they will get. And
so let me have a follow-up, because we have one question pending out there. Some tips on how to approach the subject, whether it be credit, whether it be money, whether it be budget. And if you have some examples of some folks that may have come back to you subsequent to you providing them guidance and counseling and actually going forward to doing what you recommended, any of those post stories you might want to share.
Okay, so some tips. So as I said, it's not just one conversation, it's many. And I would suggest trying to make the situation as light as possible. Go out for coffee and then have this discussion. We have date night. Do we have money discussion night? Or something like that. But do it over, like, you can do it over a meal if you're cooking a meal together, and discuss it over an activity that is not too distracting. It's not something you do at the movies. But if you're cooking a meal together and you're bringing those ingredients together, it's like you're bringing your financial life together.
Okay. So as you're saying, pass me the greens. By the way, what's your credit score?
Yeah,
right?
you can.
Pass me the butter. Are you a stiff? Oh God. Okay.
It's just joint activity. You're sitting down having coffee or tea. I say coffee, but I don't drink coffee. I'm a tea person. I'm so British. But what, whatever takes your fancy, or over a cocktail, some Chardonnay, that makes it all lighter for everyone in the conversation, right?
So here's a question out there. Do you believe that marriage is a business?
No, I don't believe it's a business. I believe it is a contractual agreement, but I don't think of it as a business. Um, some people may, and for some people in some situations, for immigration purposes, my understanding is some people do marriages for a business, but that means what the contractual relationship of a marriage is two people joining together, right? They're joining their lives together. When you think of a business, you're buying and selling some type of service or product for money, right? Or some type of thing. So that is separate. I personally don't think of it as a business, but I think of it as two people joining their individual lives together jointly. So not as a business, but I believe that you do need to think it's a contractual relationship. You're agreeing to spend your life together. So you're making financial decisions together, and to have those upfront discussions before you have the marriage helps to put you in a position of being successful during that married life.
So next question, shared bank account before marriage.
Sorry, say that again?
Having a joint bank account before marriage.
That you can, as long as you discuss upfront what that expectation is. Why are you having this joint account? Is it that you've decided that you're buying a home together and you're going to be paying those mortgage payments out of it, the gas, the electricity, and the water out of that account? And so that's the account that's going to be used. Then, to make sure to have it come from one place may be a good way to have it done. So, and it may be that you're both putting the same amount into that account each month, or it could be because there's a disparity in the salary, so you may decide that one person puts a little more than the other because they earn more than the other. You need to have clarity of what that expectation of each person is, and why would you be setting up this joint account before marriage? Is it for a home purchase? Is it just because you're living together and you're sharing expenses? Because if you have a marriage and then you open this account together, it's like joint, there's rights of survivorship for it, so it goes from one person to the other. If you're not necessarily married, it may not be divided in the same way. So each of you need to understand, if you've open this joint account, what's going to happen to that money if the other person passes away? Does it automatically go to you? Or if you break up and that person just takes that money, what is your legal recourse in that particular situation?
So the next question, you have a couple. No one really has an understanding of finances, let alone a desire perhaps to have a joint account together. How would you broach that situation? What advice would you have with the person who put that anonymous question out there? If I have a real situation and they need some advice how best to handle.
So are you saying that the person neither one of them have much money?
No, I don't think it's an issue of how much money they have. They lack the experience of how to deal with finances that's one part of it. And the second is you answered it to some degree about having a joint account. How do you get that couple, if you will, in a better place with dealing with that scenario? I don't really understand finances. Should we have a joint account and so on and so forth?
Okay, so here in that situation, it's about trying to provide them with education on the best steps on how to move forward. So there are, most people have a smartphone. So there are different websites that you can go to help you to build, to find out information on how to take those initial steps in educating yourself about finance. The government has a website, I think is the Consumer Finance Education site, and that provides you a neutral information, not biased, unbiased information about how to handle your finances. And I feel that the library is a great resource. It's local to most people. You can go in there. It's easy access to get books on how to start to build your financial life, how to take those steps to understand how to build that life together, and how to become more educated about about building that building your increasing your credit score, increasing your knowledge about opening these accounts and how to handle them going forward.
So the next question, thank you for that, Ms. Brown. What's your position on placing all assets in a trust in general to protect your assets?
Okay, so trust, like the company I work for, we have a trust department. So we deal with families that have assets that are in trust. Trusts allow you to have control. So if you want to have control, then you set up a trust, because it allows you to determine how that money will be handled even after you have passed away. But what you need to understand is that there are upfront costs usually to handle establishing a trust, because there are lawyer fees, and and you have to understand that when you're establishing trust, and if you're doing it with all of your assets, you have to go through the process of retitling all of those assets. I had a situation where a client had life insurance trust, different trusts, and they had a lawyer draft up trust documents, but then all their property had not been retitled into the trust. So they paid a lot of money, but didn't take all of the different action steps, because when you're creating this trust, then your home is no longer in your individual names, it becomes in the trust name. Then your bank accounts need to be in the trust name. You have to go through that process and understand that when you're taking any action after that, that everything is done through the trust name. So it provides you with some type of control if that's what you want. And that allows you to do that. And it also provides you with privacy. That's another benefit of having a trust. It provides you with privacy, because if you die and you have a will and your assets are not in trust.
So this next question, I think I can respond that it relates to Black banks on the East Coast in the community. Well, you have several Black banks. You have Industrial Bank in Newark, New Jersey, which was formerly, I forget the name of it, City National, I'm sorry. You have United Bank of Philadelphia, which may have been recently acquired by a group of Black individuals. Yeah, and then you have Carver Bank in Harlem. So there are a number of banks that are Black owned and operated. I suggest that you go online and do some Googling, a little research, but there are Black banks on the East Coast and throughout the country. Let's see what else we got out here. See what else we got. Okay. Any other questions or comments for Ms. Brown? I think you've answered all the questions that we have in the chat right now or in the Q&A. This is the final call, but I definitely enjoyed today's presentation, and we appreciate PPAC Gladstone for affording the African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey an opportunity to have you on today and to engage with those on Facebook Live, as well as those that are here doing the Q&A with us today.
I appreciate the chamber having me today, and I hope that the information that I provided is of value to people.
Any contact information where folks could follow up with you, follow up with the bank?
Yeah, I let me share my screen. I believe we have some contact information here. Oops, here it is. So I'm actually based in the New Providence office. So that's the one right here, 1 Academy Street, 908-464-0102. And if anyone wanted to email me, my email address is dbrown, DBROWN, @ppac.com.
Hold on, we might have some late breakers.
Oh, we've got some more questions?
Okay, let me see. Awesome. Great question from the audience. How do you get more Black people in the banking industry? You know, that you can take a stab at that. But I don't think that's really related to your presentation, but
Yeah, you know what? I'm a CFP, a certified financial planner, and the CFP board is doing a lot more advertising, working with more colleges and universities to try to get information out about this career path. We also have mentoring opportunities, you know, that people can come to us and work with us to help people understand what the career is about. And there are other African-American financial organizations as well that are trying to help support the people who are looking to be in this industry as well.
well, I know the African American Chamber of Commerce, we're always looking to assist individuals that may be looking for career opportunities. So I would suggest that you forward information to info@aaccnj.com, and we can share it with our banking members. We have over 30 financial services members that are part of the chamber, and we're glad to share that information with them and see if we can get the recommended person a chance to compete for a career opportunity. I'm a former banker and love banking. It has helped me in a number of ways to kind of navigate my life a little better. So,
and I've just put my email address in the chat because I said it wrong. So if anybody wants to email me directly, I've just put my email address in the chat for everyone to access.
Okay, well, Ms. Brown, thank you so much for sharing with us today, and all the best to PPAC, Gladstone Bank, and we'll be in touch. Have a wonderful day, and we're going to encourage you as well as others to join us at a business leadership conference, September 20th and 21st at the Palace in Somerset Park, New Jersey. Register at aaccnj.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.